notebook in his pocket at his deposition, and he held it up and he says, when I'm not at my desk and I'm on the phone, I use this notebook. When I'm at my desk, I use a notebook. George Kent said he wrote just innumerable memos to the file. Catherine Croft, she testified that she didn't believe George Kent's notes would be accurate. And so, we have all this, back and forth, but, as we get to the end here, you don't have records, you don't have your notes because you didn't take notes, you don't have a lot of recollections. I mean, this is the trifecta of unreliability. Isn't that true?
Well, what I'm trying to do today is to use the limited information I have to be as forthcoming as possible with you and the rest of the committee. And as these recollections have been refreshed by subsequent testimony, by some texts and emails that I've now had access to, I think I filled in a lot of blanks.
But a lot of it's speculation. A lot of it is your guess, and we're talking about, an impeachment of the President of the United States. So the evidence here ought to be pretty darn good.
I've been very clear as to when I was presuming, and I was presuming on the aid. On the other things, Mr. Castor, I did have some texts that I read from. So when it comes to those, I'll rely on those texts because I don't have any reason to believe that those texts were, falsely sent or that there's some subterfuge there. They are what they are. They say what they say.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Time of the gentleman has expired. We'll now move to a second staff-led round of 30 minutes. Mr. Volker, I just have a few questions before I turn it back to Mr. Goldman. You testified in response to my colleagues in the minority something along the lines of a lot of people did not make the connection between Burisma and Biden. I think a lot of people have real difficulty understanding that. Tim Morrison testified that I think it took him all of doing a Google search to find out, this is the significance of Burisma. It involves the Bidens. Are you saying during all this time up until the call you never made the connection between Burisma and the Bidens? You just thought that the president and Rudy Giuliani were interested in this one particular Ukrainian company?
Again, my role, Mr. Chairman, was just to get the meeting.
Well, I understand that, but my question is, are you saying that for months and months, notwithstanding everything Rudy Giuliani was saying on TV and all the discussion with Rudy Giuliani, that you never put Burisma together with the Bidens?
I didn't, and I wasn't paying attention to what Mr. Giuliani was saying on TV. We were talking to him directly.
Let me ask you this. Ambassador Volker testified yesterday to a similar epiphany, for lack of a better word. This is what he said. In hindsight, I now understand that others saw the idea of investigating possible corruption involving the Ukrainian company Burisma as equivalent to investigating former Vice President Biden. I saw them very different, the former being appropriate and unremarkable, the latter being unacceptable. In retrospect, I should have seen that connection differently, and had I done so, I would have raised my own objections. Does that sum up your views as well?
It does.
Now, I think you were asked a question with a bit of a incorrect premise by my colleagues in the minority about Fiona Hill saying that, referring to a drug deal between you and Mr. Mulvaney, it was Ambassador Bolton who made the comment that he didn't want to be part of any drug deal that Ambassador Sondland and Mulvaney were cooking up. No one thinks they're talking about a literal drug deal here or a drug cocktail. The import, I think, of the ambassador's comments is quite clear, that he believed that this bargain, this quid pro quo, as you've described it, over a meeting, the investigations to get the meeting was not something he wanted to be a part of. What I want to ask you about is, he makes reference in that drug deal to a drug deal cooked up by you and Mulvaney. It's the reference to Mulvaney that I want to ask you about. You've testified that Mulvaney was aware of this quid pro quo, of this condition that the Ukrainians had to meet, that is, announcing these public investigations to get the White House meeting. Is that right?
Yeah, a lot of people were aware of it, and
Including Mr. Mulvaney,
correct,
and including the Secretary of State.
correct.
Now, have you seen the acting Chief of Staff's press conference in which he acknowledged that the military aid was withheld in part because of a desire to get that 2016 investigation you've talked about?
I don't think I saw it live. I saw it later. Yeah.
So you saw him acknowledge publicly what you have confirmed too, that Mr. Mulvaney understood that 2 + 2 = 4. Is that right?
Well, again, I didn't know that the aid was conclusively tied. I was presuming he was in a position to say yes it was or no it wasn't, because
And he said yes it was, did he
he said
not?
yes it was.
Mr. Goldman.
All right. We'll let you guys tune in somewhere and listen to the rest of the questioning for the impeachment inquiry hearings on the 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
Thank you for listening to Truman's Town Hall. Share this podcast with your friends and neighbors and subscribe today.